There we go. Good morning. The March 10th, 2021 meeting of the Board of Estimates is now called to order. In the interest of promoting health and safety as we continue to deal with COVID-19 pandemic, the Board of Estimate will continue to meet virtually. At this time, I will ask Comptroller Henry for any corrections, additions, and noted abstentions from today's agenda.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning. There are no changes and corrections. Under deferrals, the following items are being deferred. On pages 5 and 6, item number 1, extra work order 009 SC910, improvement to the sanitary sewer collection system in the Herring Run sewer shed is being deferred. As is item number 2, transfer of funds. On pages 10 through 11, item number 3, Bureau of Procurement B5006166, towing services for cars, trucks, and heavy equipment is being deferred. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. President, if I could go back. The first one
Mr.
on
Comptroller,
page 6.
real quick, since you paused, is your paper or something over top of your microphone? Your voice is extremely distorted.
No, is this better?
That's a lot better.
Okay, let's try this. That first item that I read on pages 5 and 6, the extra work order and the transfer of funds, those are being deferred from today to March 24th. Then the item on page 10 through 11, pages 10 through 11, item number 3, the towing services, that is being deferred from today to March 17th. On pages 25 and 26, Department of General Services, use of Baltimore City Public Schools contract IFB 18010, roofing system maintenance and repair services, is being deferred from today to March 17th. On page 35, Department of Public Works, Office of Engineering and Construction, amendment number 2 to agreement with EBA Engineers Incorporated is being deferred from today to March 17th. Pages 41 through 42, Department of Public Works, Office of Engineering and Construction, amendment number 2 to agreement with EA Engineering Science and Technology Incorporated is being deferred from today to March 17th. And on pages 44 to 46, item number 3, Bureau of Procurement B5000547, janitorial services for groups 1 through 6 is being deferred from today until March 17th. The following item is being moved to the routine agenda, and that is page 59, Department of Recreation and Parks on-call task assignment. The following items are being moved to the non-routine agenda. On pages 8 through 9, item numbers 1 and 2, Department of Public Works, Office of Engineering and Construction, SC926RR, Electrical Distribution System Reliability Improvements, Physical Security Upgrades and On-Site Power Generation at the Tasco Wastewater Treatment Plant. A protest was received from Robert Fulton de Shield, PA, on behalf of Ullman Chute Construction, LLC. A response to the protest was received from Pascal Stevens, LLC, on behalf of Whiting Turner Contracting Company. On page 13, item number 1, Health Department, agreement with Baltimore City Board of School Commissioners. On page 14, item number 5, Health Department, agreement with Progressive Therapy Incorporated. On pages 14 and 15, items number 6 and 7, the Health Department, agreements with the Johns Hopkins University. On pages 47 and 48, item number 5, Bureau of Procurement contract number 06000, adverts for tax sale 2021. On pages 48 and 49, item number 6, Bureau of Procurement contract number 06000, online tax sale auction. On pages 53 and 54, Department of Transportation task assignment number 008, with WSP USA, formerly Parsons Brinkenhoff Incorporated. We have the following abstentions. On pages 14 through 15, Honorable Mayor Brandon Scott is abstaining on items number 6 and 7, Department of Health, agreements with the Johns Hopkins University. And there are no other abstentions for Honorable President Nick Mosby, Acting City Solicitor James Shea, Acting Director of Public Works Matthew Garbark, or myself. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Comptroller. In the interest of the public, is there anyone that is joining us today that we just deferred an item? I believe I do not see any.
Mr. Speaker, this is Charles Curlett. I represent the Auto Barn. You gave me the opportunity to speak last week, and I thank you again for that. I've seen the agenda. I note that there's a noted issue regarding MBEWBE participation. We're prepared to engage directly with the Bureau of Procurement in responding to that. And therefore, but since this matter won't be taken up today, we'll do that in the course of the next week and look for the next time we're back on the agenda.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Kirtland.
Thank you, Mr. Mosby.
No, thank you. Moving on. Now I'd like to direct the board members' attentions to a memorandum from my office dated March the 3rd, 2021, identifying matters to be considered as routine agenda items together with any corrections and additions that have been noted by the comptroller. I will entertain a motion to approve all items contained in the routine agenda.
So moved.
I second.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor of approving all the items on the routine agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. The routine agenda has now been adopted. Moving on to non-routine agenda. First up, we have on page 8, item number 1, SC 926RR, Electrical Distribution System Contracting Company, Reliability Improvements, Physical Security Upgrades, and On-Site Power Generation of Patapsco Wastewater Treatment Plant. Also on the non-routine agenda is related transfer of funds for this project, which can be found on page 9. The Department of Public Works evaluated bids on this project, and the recommendation from the Office of Engineering and Construction is to award the contract to the Whiting Turner Contracting Company. A protest has been received by Robert Fulton Dashel on behalf of Ullman Schultz Construction LLC. Mr. Paschal Stevens LLC provided a response to protests on behalf of the Whiting Turner Company. First, we will hear from the Department of Public Works. Please, the floor is yours, DPW.
Good morning. Thank you, Council President Mosby. Good morning, Mayor Scott, Comptroller Henry, City Solicitor Shea, Mr. Shea, and Director Garbark. Joseph Cabetta for the Department of Public Works. I'm also joined by the team from the Office of Engineering and Construction for any details regarding the project. Also on the call is Mike Mullen from the Law Department, and I think we might have Tenora Houston-Burgee from the Contracts Administration for any questions regarding legal or procurement issues. Finally, we have the Engineer of Record, CCJM, who provided the independent third-party assessment, and they are represented by David Safel and Uday Patel. As you know, DPW does rely on third-party assessments of bids prior to recommending award, and so that assessment was done by CCJM. With that, I just want to provide a little background. What we are requesting, what DPW is requesting, is that the board approve the award of SC 926RR, the Electrical Distribution System Reliability Improvements, Physical Security Upgrades, and On-Site Power Generation at the Patapsco Wastewater Treatment Plant to the Whiting Turner Contracting Company. In addition to their bid coming in as the lowest out of 4 at $80,147,000. They were also found to be responsive and responsible in the bid, and the bid was found to be materially balanced by a third-party engineer. In general, this is a a fairly significant electrical project at the Patapsco wastewater treatment plant, which is one of our two wastewater facilities in the city that the city owns. Some big ticket items on this project include the installation of a 13 kilovolt switch gear, the 50 megawatt capacity substation, as well as the provision of a third feeder from BG&E. Little background on the bids, as you note from the suffix RR, this is the third bid. The original bid was initially received in 2018. At the time, we had two bidders, Whiting Turner and WM Schlosser. Those bids were rejected due to the fact that the bids received far exceeded the engineer's estimate. We rebid this contract a year later. The same two bidders submitted, Whiting Turner and WM Schlosser. This time we noted that inadvertently, one of the key bid items, I mentioned the third feeder for BG&E, that particular bid item was inadvertently deleted from the package. For that reason, we had to reject those bids again. In both cases, Whiting Turner was the low bidder of the two. Prior to the third round last year, we decided to remove the cap on mobilization, which typically is 10% of the contract value. The reason for removing the cap was to encourage more participation, since we, as I noted, there were only two bidders in both the first two cases. And after removing the cap, we received bids, and we were successful in actually getting more competition. Two additional bidders joined the pool, Allman Shooting and Kiewit. In this third bid, Whiting Turner was again the lowest bidder, coming in at that noted value of $80,147,000. The independent assessment found the bid to be materially balanced, and therefore, as I mentioned, we are requesting that the bid be awarded to Whiting Turner Contracting Company. Thank you.
No, thank you, Mr. Kebede. No, is that right? Give me right. Give me right.
Kabuddy.
Kabuddy. All right.
Kabuddy.
After week like 20, I'm gonna get it right. I'm gonna make you surprised. See, normally they have it in my script, but they didn't have your name, so I had to go off memory. But I got it. Kabuddy. Mr. Comptroller, do you have a question? I see your hand raised.
I do. I have a couple. If you could just lay them out for straight comparison, what was Whiting Turner's bid and what was Allman Shooty's bid?
Whiting Turner's bid was $80,147,000. Allman Shooty's bid was $80,790,000.
Okay, and the other question, in the first version of the RFP, I'm sorry, did you say the mobilization cap in the first version was 5% or 10%?
10%.
10%, and then the second version, it was still 10%.
It was still 10%.
It was still 10%, and then in the third iteration, you took the cap off completely.
That's correct.
Was there any other change in the RFP other than the mobilization cap being lifted between the first version and the third version?
Between the first, I believe the other change might have been that we received WIFIA funding, and the WIFIA funding brought with it Davis-Bacon rules and other stipulations that did not exist in the previous iterations.
I'm just trying to gauge if it's fair to say that you said in the first iteration, both of the bids were significantly higher than the engineer's estimate. And then
Sorry, Mr. Comptroller, in the first bid, the second bid we pulled because of our
Right.
error. Yes.
So I guess what I'm curious about is, so the bid prices dropped when the mobilization cap was lifted.
The bid prices did not drop. And if I could get Mike Hallman, if you were on the call, he can provide more details on the trajectory. But I don't believe the bid prices dropped from the first to the second to the third. In fact, they actually did go up nominally.
So
Mike Hallman?
I'm sorry. I'll wait for
Go ahead.
Mike. Well, I'm trying to get an idea of, so the reason that you felt comfortable moving forward with one of the bids in the third iteration was you just effectively, and I don't mean this to sound callous, but you effectively gave up on having bids meet the engineer's estimate? Or did the engineer's estimate also go up the third time?
The engineer's estimate did go up the first time.
Go up the third time.
The first time, the third time. So in the first round, actually, I only have the numbers for the second bid, but the second bid, the engineer's estimate was about $68 million. And Whiting Turner's bid was 74, a little bit north of $74 million. In the third round, the engineer's estimate was 73 million. And Whiting Turner's and Ullman Schutte was north of 80 million. And so in that third bid, both bids were within a 10% variance of the engineer's estimate.
Now I want to know what the difference was on the first bid when they were all thrown out, or both thrown out. What was the engineer's estimate the first time?
Let's see, Michael Hallman or David Seffel. I'm going to need some data from our team.
Yes,
if you are talking, you are muted. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is G. Good morning, everyone, Mr. Mayor. The first bid estimate was 49.7 million, and the engineer's estimate, and the Whiting Turner bid was 65.9 million.
Huh. Okay. So I'm just surprised that there's been a lot of changes here in terms of prices and bids if nothing else substantial has changed in the RFP except the city's willingness to finance I mean, if anything, I would have thought that taking out the mobilization cap would have meant the bids would have gone down, because now we're covering the financing of a lot of equipment. Okay, so that, I guess.
So Mr. Control,
Yeah.
just for the record, you're basically saying, so it went from like 65 million to 80 million, $15 million difference, right?
Well, actually, Mr. President, the first thing I'm saying is that our own engineer's estimate went from 50 million to 73 million over the span of those three bids. And the low bid received went from 66 to 80. Which I guess is technically a curiosity. I guess technically that's not relevant to the matter before us. What I think is relevant is that the final difference between the low bidder and the protester is less than $600,000, which makes it a fraction of a percent of not only the contract price, but a very small percentage of the increase in the engineer's estimate over the three iterations of this bid, even though, as far as I can tell, the work itself didn't actually change. So this is a question that I would pose to the board, or perhaps are the what institutional memory we have participating. Is there any precedent or any standard we follow when the difference between low bidder and protester is below a certain percentage point, or is it literally if you're the low bidder by $1, you're the low bidder?
Low bidder by $1.
Okay. All right. Okay, then that's all the questions I have at this time. I may have some more later. Thank you.
Yeah,
Mr. President?
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
No, I was just going to jump in to say that I know that, as you both know, the administrator talked to you guys. This is one of the reasons why we are doing the total rehaul, because we have something that's in law that, 30 whatever years ago, it made sense for the city to operate through procurement like that. But we now have to modernize it to meet the needs of a 21st century city. And we look forward to working with you, the president, and the entire board to make that happen. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. DPW Director.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have two questions, Mr. Cabetta. Didn't you indicate that between the second and the third bid, there was a large component of the project that was mistakenly not included that dealt with a large feed from BG&E, which would have increased the overall estimate of the project?
That is correct. The second bid inadvertently deleted that scope item.
Okay.
So that can contribute or did contribute to the variance.
And then I guess I'm just wondering from the engineers of record why, and from you, why the city believes that this is in the best interest of the city in terms of the removal of the caps for this particular project.
Mr. Patel?
It's basically, if you look at it between the bid item 101 and 102, that's where the dollars has moved around. So Whiting Turner Corporation, which has the bid item 101, which has the major electrical work cost. So that dollar shifted to the mobilization. It's basically, the way we look at it, all these electrical equipments are more kind of a customized type equipment, and they need to be ordered. In order for that to be processed, usually manufacturer requires some sort of a deposit and commitment from the contractors, and it's basically, that starts the process where there is a substantial upfront cost that the contractor has to put up even to process the paperwork and the soft drawings and whatnot to get us to our engineer's approval and owner's approval. So it's just a matter of dollar got shifted from bid item 101 to mobilization bid item to carry some of those costs, which was our intent was to allow that in that mobilization bid. And also, it's like the difference between the bids, there's a lot of increase in the copper cost, and aluminum has gone in last few years because of the NAFTA and whatnot. And that's the reason our bids estimates have gone higher. And with this COVID-19, that has another situation now. All the orders need to be put in advance so that they can get into the manufacturing line. Otherwise, it can delay the project.
Thank you.
Mr. Patel, what is the difference in mobilization costs between the two bids? You said that line 101 and 102, just the mobilization line, what's the difference between the two bids?
You mean between who's? So if we just add up the Whiting Turner bid item 101, which is $46.5 million, and bid item 102, which is 19.4. And if we look at the Ullman Schulte's numbers, they have $61 million in bid item 101 and $5.7 million in the mobilization item 102.
So
it's
the
just
mobilization was the mobilization was 5 million in the one bid versus how much in the other bid?
The Whiting Turner has 19.4 million for
Gotcha.
mobilization.
So $14 million more in mobilization.
Right. So there is the $11 million difference in bid item 101, $11.5 million between Whiting Turner and Ullman Soltich.
Thank you. At this point, are there any additional questions for Mr. Patel? Mr. Kabeda? I got it right that time. Mr. Kabeda or DPW? Hearing none, we're going to move to Mr. Dashiell and his clients, the makers of the protest. The floor is yours. I'm sorry, Mr. Dashiell, you are still on mute.
All right. Good morning, Mr. President, Mr. Mayor, members of the board, and other members of other persons participating in this activity. We are correct. You correctly focus upon the difference in mobilization between the two bids here, and my client will later address that issue in particular and its effect upon the bidders. The question is, what was the intent of the city when it deleted or removed the cap on mobilization? Someone asked the engineer why that cap was removed, and I never really heard the answer. But the fact is that in every bid, there's always equipment that's got to be ordered, and that is paid for as the work is performed, as the Green Book says. You're paid as a percentage of completion. Mobilization, on the other hand, conceptually, is only for items that the contractor has to pay for up front, and has to expend the money before they're actually in a position to earn any money under the contract. The engineer said that the electrical equipment here was the ordering of it was a condition preceding, had to be the engineer's approval. That is correct. If the engineer has not yet approved the specifications for the customized electrical equipment that's going to be incorporated into the work, how then could you include mobilization for a figure that for work that you don't even know the cost of yet, for equipment that hasn't been designed yet, and you don't even know now the other thing is, my understanding is that the city not only did an estimate of the total cost of the job, and you might ask the question, how is it that the city's estimate went from 49 million to 73 million with no change in the work? The change in the work only occurred between the second and the third, when the component had been inadvertently removed from the second time. But it was in the first bid. It was in the first design. At that time, the engineer's estimate was 49 million, and it went to 73 million with I don't know what the explanation for that is, but the engineer also did an estimate of mobilization. We understand, at least I've been told, that the engineer's estimate of mobilization on this contract was only $10 million. $9 million less than what Whiting and Turner has in this. And we're also told that the engineer's estimate of $10 million included whatever was estimated to be the amount required to pre-order the electrical equipment. So even if you include the electrical equipment in the city's estimate of the mobilization, you still only come up to $10 million, and there's still a $9 million spread, which is probably why, and I don't want to speak for an engineer, which is probably why in the engineer's report, they specifically recommended to the city that it have the apparent low bidder explain that difference. They specifically said, have them show you in advance, not after award, but up front. They recommended that the city find out exactly, get the breakdown from the low bidder, because they recognize, I suspect, that they just couldn't explain where that $9 million delta came from, if in fact it's true that the electrical equipment was already included in their own estimate of $10 million, and where they also said that without their assumption of inclusion of that equipment, the appropriate mobilization would have been somewhere between 3 to 5 million, which is exactly what my client included in its bid. Now, when you allow a bidder to bump up mobilization, that means the city is prepaying for something. That means that money is coming out of the city's coffer and going into the hands of the contractor. The contractor, and that's why the mobilization is limited to only those things that the contractor has to pay for out of pocket. The rest of the Green Book requires that the payments on a contract for the actual use of the equipment or the performance of the work is on the basis of a percentage of completion. The city doesn't prepay for work. No municipality, no public body does. You do the work first and then you get paid for it. If everybody could bill for the work that they haven't performed or even the equipment that they haven't performed up front, think of what mobilization would be. The mobilization here didn't have a cap, but it did have a condition. The condition is that it be reasonable. The language that was incorporated into this bid document with respect to mobilization only says all in other similar items. Well, there is no similar item to electrical equipment in item 102. That's 101 work. 101 is the work that's required under the contract. That's what you get paid for on a percentage of completion basis, not upfront. So one, I seriously question whether the electrical components were anticipated at the time the drawings were created, at the time the job was bid. I seriously question that it could have been anticipated that the cost of equipment required to be paid up front would have been in mobilization at a time when nobody even knew what the equipment was going to be because it was all custom order. I question that. But even if it was, there's no explanation for why the city's estimate of mobilization was 10 million, including the equipment, and now they recommend award to a low bidder who's doubled that amount in mobilization. Think of the difference, and my client will speak to this, the difference that that margin that the comptroller talks about, the difference in the business would have completely disappeared had my client known that they can include pre-ordered equipment as a part of mobilization. It's never been done before. It is completely at odds with the way the city does business. It's completely at odds with the way the city traditionally regards mobilization. The goal is to reduce the amount you have to spend when it's not related to actual performance of work. That's the goal. And Mr. President, I would like to have Matt Alleman come in because I'm not the contractor. I'm just the paid spokesman. So I'd like to have my contractor who actually has experience in performing city work and recently completed a very significant project in the same area for the city. I'd like to have Matt give you the benefit of his experience.
Yes, and we will get to him, Mr. Dashiell, but I think you put a lot out there. So want to make sure before we move on, if there's any questions regarding that. I mean, I think some of the key takeaways that I've heard is that your concern around the ability to understand and know what the mobilization costs would be without understanding and know the specifications of this particular job based off of the design not being completed, correct?
That's one issue, yes.
Right. And then another large issue I heard is as it relates to the mobilization cost, the delta between what's actually bid upon versus what the engineering estimates are, and if that's reasonable, right?
Also correct.
And then another third point that I've gathered from what you said is this a standard practice or is this a non-traditional path? If it is a non-traditional path, why are we doing it on this particular job? And I guess I'll add in my motivation, if that question is right, is are we setting a precedent that we do not want to kind of go down? So I guess forget the precedent piece. I guess your question for the third question would be, is this a non-traditional way of handling a job that's similar from taking the cap off mobilization?
Well, no, you're right on all fronts. It is the city doesn't always impose a cap. I mean, a cap is a fixed percentage. They don't always do it, but they always require that the mobilization be reasonable, and they always require that the mobilization be limited to upfront costs that the contractor actually incurs before he's in a position to earn any money from performance of the work. That much is true. With that, I would list out some questions. Again, I would like Mr. Alleman to address the other issues.
That's fine. So I guess just for the board, the 3 points that I was able to pull from what you said, is there any other points that we need to pull? I just want to ensure that on the back end, when the city responds, we can have all of the answers to your concerns. Did I basically get it in a nutshell, or there's any other elements that I missed?
And well, there was one that you didn't mention. That was the engineer's recommendation to have the apparent low bidder break down its mobilization figure because it is so significantly higher than the city's own estimate and over $11 million higher than mobilization in my client's bid. And I don't know whether that recommendation has been followed.
Understood. So an itemization of the mobilization costs.
Correct.
An itemized list of the mobilization costs.
Correct.
Got it. So we got those four things from the city perspective. Is it
Alderman?
Mr. Alderman, are you still on?
Yes, Mr. President. Good morning. Good morning.
The floor is yours, Mr. Alderman.
Good morning. My name is Matt Alleman. I am the president of Alleman Schutte Construction. Appreciate the opportunity to be before the board and talk about this important matter. A little history of myself and our company. Have been bidding work for the city for over 35 years, participated in probably over 100 procurements. We've had the fortunate privilege of working for the city at all your major facilities on dozens of contracts, very familiar with your procurement procedures. We're currently completing contract 918H, which is a $430 million job at Back River, a very successful project. I'll take 1 minute to thank the leadership, Yosef, Azam Ahmed, and Mohammed Dodar have provided outstanding leadership for the city. That project has employed millions of hours of men and women in the city we've employed. We've had over $80 million of minority and women business enterprises involved in that project, and it's on time and it's under budget. So highly successful project that the city should celebrate. So what's important to us as a bidder, obviously, is to make sure that we have a lot of faith in the procurement process. Without faith in the procurement process, obviously, we usually don't participate. And in the past, we've had a lot of confidence in the city and what they've done moving forward. But I look at this procurement, I'm very concerned. First of all, the engineer issued a report that said we took the cap off so that the bidders could include in bid item 101 specialty equipment. Those words do not appear in the contract anywhere. It doesn't even come close to saying that. Had it said that, we would have increased our MOB fees, as Whiting Turner did, and decreased our price significantly. So that's item one. Those words don't appear. Item two, in our opinion, the MOB fee by Whiting Turner is unconscionable. To pay somebody 25% of their contract value up front before they've turned a shovel, before they've done any work, I've never seen in 35 years in this industry. We work for DC Water. We work for Howard County. We work for Baltimore County. I can go on down the list. I have never seen a mobilization fee of 25% of the contract value anywhere in the United States of America, anywhere we've worked. It makes no sense. All projects have specialty equipment. This project's 37 months long. We would install this specialty equipment towards the end of the project. There is plenty of time for you to follow your normal procedures. But let's take the engineer's word at face value. They intended for us to be allowed to bill in advance for equipment that's not engineered, not designed. You're just going to rely on faith, hand us a bunch of money, tens of millions of dollars to do it. Let's just say that was their intent. Number one, we would expect that to be in clear words in the contract, so all bidders could be on equal footing. We could be on equal footing with Whiting Turner and everybody else could be bidding the same job, number one. Number two, that MOB fee should be reasonable. When we went back and looked at it, the engineer's MOB fee that he put in his report of $10 million or 12.5% of the job would have been reasonable. 25% is not reasonable. I've witnessed the city, when bids are unbalanced in the past, they throw those bids out, and it's the right thing to do. We don't want to advance pay for work that makes no sense. And I would just appeal to the board that the only fair thing to do here and the right thing to do here, if your intention is we can all bill for equipment in advance, which I don't advise and I don't think is necessary. But if that's your intention, The only fair thing to do is put those words in the contract so everybody's on equal footing, rebid this job, and you will get a better price. And I heard the Mr. Comptroller talk about how, why is this price going up? Well, you know, if you want a better price on this job and you want to do what's right by the contracting community, that is the fair and right thing to do. And I will just add one more thing for the board to consider. There are a lot of contractors watching this because this is so unusual. You know, I've had competitors I bump into said, because this job bid last May, what is going on? Why isn't the city throwing that bid out? How could they ever pay 25% for mobilization? And if this is allowed to stand, I'm not going to be the only person rattled by this procurement. There's a lot of major contractors who are going to scratch their head, take note, and say, what is going on? This just doesn't happen in our industry. And I want respectfully would ask the board to consider all these key points, because we do enjoy our relationship with the city. It's been excellent. We've had some very successful projects. And I'll say this, Whiting Turner is a fine company. I'm not here to disparage them, but what I'm saying is what happened on this procurement is wrong. And I'm looking to the board to make this right and do what's in your best interest. If you want us to include equipment in our mobilization, please use those plain words in the contract, amend the contract to say that, rebid this job, and you will get a significantly lower price. And I thank you for your time. I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
No, thank you for that, Mr. Allman. It seems like you just provided a little deeper context in what Mr. Dashiell kind of added. The 25% mobilization cost of the total amount of job is well noted. And at this point, I'll turn it back to the city to see, based off of the 4 points that we were able to pull out from Mr. Dashiell's testimony through the appeal, as well as Mr. Allman, the 25%. I'll turn it back over to the city to communicate. Before we do that, I see your hand raised, Mr. Comptroller.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to add one other item of concern that I would ask DPW to address, is if, and I may not be doing these calculations correctly, but from what I can tell, there's a bid difference of $672,000 between the low bidder and the protester. And there is a $13.7 million difference in mobilization costs. And I'm not sure right now what market rate is for financing this kind of work. But if you just take a simple basic 5%, the cost of the city financing that extra $13.7 million of work exceeds the delta between the two bids. So I would like to add that as another item of concern, that effectively we may not be getting the low bid here because the city is absorbing greater financing costs for one bidder than the other. And depending on what the price of money is right now on the street, that could mean that Whiting Turner isn't actually the low bidder.
Kind of to your point as well, Mr. Comptroller, this is where I thought you were going, particularly knowing that we're in unprecedented challenges right now with COVID-19, city's budget, and losing that money for our coffers. We've already dipped into the rainy day funds. We have projections of deficits moving forward. So I think that kind of fits into the same posture as the concern you just raised. Right now, Mr. Allman, I'm going to give you an opportunity to speak again later, but I think we have a lot to kind of unpackage. We want the city to have the opportunity to kind of respond Mr. Cubby, if you would like to respond now or have someone from DPW respond, that's fine. Or if you think that with the basis of so many questions, you want to take a step back and maybe we defer it to next week, I'm definitely okay with that because I know we have a lot of information for you to kind of unpackage at this point.
No, Mr. Comptroller, DPW should respond right now. I mean,
Yes,
sorry,
sir.
Mr. President.
It's all good. I got you. All right. So someone from DPW, if you could kind of go through the list of concerns that have been raised.
Okay, I'll cover a few items to respond, and then possibly Mike Mullen can address some of the questions around the procurement. But first off, this definitely is not traditional practice. I believe that was a question or a comment made earlier in that our typical projects do have caps on mobilization. We have exercised the option of removing the caps in some cases where there are unique project requirements, such as this project, where there are long lead items, big ticket items that we believe would be in the best interest of the city for the contractor to have the leeway to procure. Now, in reference to the actual bid of $19.4 million for the mobilization line item, should this contract be awarded to Whiting Turner, they would be required to provide a breakdown of those mobilization costs. And one thing to note about the variance, as you noted, 19.4 million versus 5.7 million for Alderman Schutte in the mobilization line item. If you look at bid item number 101, which is the big chunk, the electrical work scope itself, it's flipped in that you can see where the variance went, because 61 million for Alderman Schutte for that line item versus 46.5 million for Whiting Turner. Essentially, in the removal of the cap, and again to respond to Mr. Dashiell, the removal of the cap was done to invite more participation from the contractor pool or contractor community. So that was one of the primary reasons on the front end. But in reference to the mobilization costs and whether or not the city would be exposed, there is a performance bond. There are liquidated damages. There are various measures that these contracts have to ensure that the work is performed. So what Whiting Turner did is essentially take advantage of the leeway provided in the mobilization cost in adding to that line item. That is an avenue or an approach that they chose to take. That was a business decision that they made. But when you look at the bottom line number, the assessment was done to determine that the bids were not materially unbalanced. The variance between the two bids is about $600,000. It is just the approach that was taken to execute the project that stands out. I'll stop there, and I don't know, Mike Mullen, if you have any input that you want to provide regarding some of the things that were brought up.
Mr. President, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Comptroller, and honorable members, Mike Mullen from the Law Department. The comment I would make is that this solicitation and the specifications that went out were the same for all bidders. The Green Book normal terms for mobilization were altered on this job, and they make it clear that mobilization here could include many other items that would be necessary to be performed prior to beginning work on the job. I think what you're seeing here between the two bidders that are before you is a difference in bidding style. Whiting Turner has opted to take advantage of that expanded specification that was provided to all bidders and they have included extensive costs up front for long-term lead items. As I understand it, these are specialty items that are made for this project. They have a long lead time. I believe that our consulting engineers have said that before, and I believe that Mr. Kabidi has said that as well. And Whiting Turner took advantage of that, and they were entitled to do so. Ullman Schutte could have done the same thing. They chose a different approach. You heard Mr. Ullman say that he was going to put it in the job later on. So that's a legitimate approach, but it's a different approach. Doesn't make the bid by Whiting Turner improper in any way. You've heard the testimony from the consulting engineers, and the consulting engineers traditionally are the gold standard for the board to make a decision on an unbalanced bid claim, because it's not a legal argument. I mean, Mr. DeShiel and I can argue until the cows come home, but it's really a technical issue. Is the bid unbalanced? And that requires engineering expertise and experience. And we've heard our engineers say that they don't believe this is an unbalanced bid. They look at item number 101, which is the bulk of the actual work in the contract. And on that item, we have Ullman Schutte coming in at 61 million and some change, and Whiting Turner is at 46 million. So there's a large difference there. There is a large difference on the mobilization number. And as I said, I believe that represents a bidding approach that just shows the differentiation between the two companies in their approach. I mean, these are both excellent companies. There's no question about it. They've both done a great deal of work for the city. Mr. Ullman is completely correct in what he said to the board earlier, and we have great respect for both of them. The charter requires the board to accept the lowest responsible bid. Whiting Turner is the lowest bid, and unless you find that their bid is unbalanced, and I don't think there has been sufficient testimony to do that here. The experts are saying it's not. The engineering people are saying that it's not. The other thing I would add from a legal standpoint is the Green Book requires the DPW certify and be satisfied that any expenses that Whiting Turner submits as part of that mobilization payment in the first payout of this contract has to be proven to be real. In other words, Whiting Turner can't just say, well, we ordered the equipment. They have to show that it's actually ordered. They're on the hook for it. It's in the pipeline. They've done the work that's needed to get this job started. And they've done what they said they were going to do in terms of getting these long lead time items started early on so that they don't have a delay later on in the project. If DPW is not satisfied that all of that is correct, Whiting Turner's not going to pay a nickel. It's that simple. They have to be showing DPW that they have incurred the ordering expenses, the actual cost, whatever it is that they're going to present. DPW and its engineers and its consultants have to be satisfied that that is all above board before they will authorize a payment. And other than that, I would just defer to the technical folks here. I can't really answer the question, President Scott and Comptroller, that you all added. Excuse me, Mayor Scott and the other gentleman that asked the questions about the financing rate. I don't know the answer to that question, Comptroller, so I really can't address that. I don't know if the people from DPW can address that or not.
Yeah, I guess, Mr. Mullen, the one question I have for you from a legal perspective is, based off of what you just communicated to us, a responding bidder could have literally put all of the equipment onto the mobilization costs, and it would have been consistent with the modifications to the Green Book regulations that the city decided to go down the path for this particular job.
I can't answer, President Mosby, if it would have been allowable to put all of the equipment there. Mobilization is long-term, long lead items are supposed to be included according to the altered spec that was in the Green.
But you didn't, when you read the exact passage, it didn't say specifically long lead items, I don't think.
No, but it reads as follows. Mobilization shall include all other work and operations which must be performed prior to beginning work on compensable items of work of the project. The compensable items of work are in 101. That's all the electrical gear we're talking about. And that includes all other expenses. That's the added language that's not in the normal Green Book mobilization clause.
And what's the legal definition of compensable item?
I'm sorry, sir, say it again.
What's the legal definition of compensable item?
Of a compensable item?
Correct.
Well, it would be something that has actually been incurred by the contractor and that we have confirmed that they actually did order it and it is needed for the job. It's something that's required for the project. If it's not, then it's not going to be compensable.
Okay, that's what I assumed. So that means any item on that particular job could have been placed inside of the mobilization, because long lead, short lead is not part of the description that you read associated with the changes to the Green Book recommendation.
That's correct. Those terms are not in there.
Correct. So I guess back to my original question, any item that the contractor could approve to the city that would fit under this compensable item type of definition that's built inside of the change to the Green Book, any item that the contractor would have decided to do from a mobilization perspective would have been acceptable under that. And as long as they had the lowest bid being $1 a penny based off of whatever equipment they decided to bring into mobilization, it seems like based off of what your recommendation is from a legal perspective, that the city would have to award that job.
I think the language talks about items that must be performed prior to beginning work. So in other words, I think that incorporates long lead time items. If you have to order them ahead of time so that they'll be ready for later in the job, I think that's what mobilization is all about here. I think that language is more expansive than it is in the standard Green Book definition and requirement. This is a different language, and it talks about that must be performed prior to beginning work on compensable items of the work at the project site. That is the 101 category of work, which is the installation of all of this switching gear and electrical components, as I understand.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mullen. I guess now switching back to DPW as it relates to when we talk about this long lead item, I think I heard Mr. Ullman say earlier that the expectation is that the particular electrical equipment that we're talking about wouldn't be installed for a couple years. I believe, if I'm correct, you might have said 3 years potentially from now. When we say long lead items, is there an expectation that it's really challenging to procure whatever equipment that we're talking about in that 3-year time frame? Or are we talking a delta of 4, 5, 6, 7 months that would not change the overall product as it relates to finishing the job on time and on spec in 3 years when it would be installed? Mr. DPW, can you respond to that? Or
Mr. President, I'd like to suggest perhaps that Mr. Stevens from Whiting Turner, who might be able to speak more specifically to their bid.
Okay. I'll definitely, thank you, Mr. Director. Mr. Stevens, the floor is yours.
Thank you all very much. And before I forget, happy birthday, Mr. President. It's good to see everybody. Mr. President, you said we've unpacked a lot of stuff today, and we have. But I don't want to lose sight on a few things. First of all, this was the first time that Ullman Schulte bid this project. Whiting Turner bid it 3 different times. Whiting Turner understands this project better than Ullman Schulte does. And as a result of that, they understood this work inside and out. And that shows, as a result, that when this mobilization the cap was removed, they understood, just like Ullman Schulte should have understood, that 2 significant aspects of this work. One of them was sole sourced by ABB, which is the electrical control panels, at about $7 or $8 million, I think. And then there's another component, and there are only 2 providers, one of which is also ABB, and then there's an alternative. Both of those sources required, by their commercial terms, payment not only for procurement, but for design. Now, we have a project that's already been designed, and the city's already paid for the design, and it's been waiting and waiting. The city's already lost that money. Part of this is delegated design to these two significant distributing companies. ABB is already out there at Back River. I was out there in November, and you can see these big giant panels that say ABB on them. That is what is required by the city, and the city imposed upon Whiting Turner and Ullman Schulte this particular vendor, and required us to comply with their payment requirements. I think as a result of that, I wasn't privy, of course, to what the engineer's decision was, but what we know today was that there was an intentional decision to release the cap on this. And what we also know is that the engineer has reviewed this, and their conclusion is that the way that Whiting Turner bid this project will result in a better project. They specifically say that Whiting Turner's approach to include these initial expenses is in compliance with the intent of the contract book and expected to contribute to the better execution of the project. And when we're talking about, well, financing dollars, we've seen an admission by Ullman Schulte that their price was higher, or at least that's what they're telling the board today. Well, we would have given you a reduced cost had we known. Well, they didn't say that they were told something different in the pre-bid invitation, pre-bid questioning phase. They clearly didn't ask the question, what can we include in mobilization? A lot of this, in Whiting Turner's opinion, is a very close competitor. They're both equal. The amount of work that Ullman Schulte has said that they've done for the city is absolutely consistent with the amount of work and benefit that Whiting Turner has provided to this city. It's a local company, as everybody, I believe, knows, and they've satisfied all of the minority business. And what Mr. DeShiel has said here is that the mobilization is intended to pay for those things that are necessary to kick off the project. The specification section, item 102 that Mr. Mullen just read, it says that this mobilization shall, not may, not can, shall also include all other work and operations which must be performed prior to beginning the work on compensable items of work at the project. These are necessary elements that have to be purchased prior to even delivery, prior to even, as Mr. DeShiel pointed out, prior to approval. We need these vendors to actually design it, and then they submit it through the submission process, and the engineer of record will look at those and look at what is produced by the delegated design and determine if it satisfies their design intent. So the takeaway, the big picture is, as Mr. Mullen said, we are the lowest responsive bidder, and this was not only permitted, but these elements. We're not talking, as Mr. President, you pointed out, shoveling and front loading everything into that. That's not what happened here. This bid item increased because of putting the amount of necessary financial effort that would be part of bid 101, bid item 101, into bid item 102. And I think what is interesting to look at, we've been talking about the engineer's estimates, and I want to talk about two elements of that. The original engineer's estimate, I believe, was testified as being $49.7 million. And Whiting Turner's bid in this job is only $80 million, and so is Ullman Schulte's. But the engineer's estimate for this particular bid jumped to $73 million. Whiting Turner's bid did not jump proportionally. I think that evidences how well it understands this job. In addition, what I want to point out is that the engineer's estimate combined for this bid, for bid items 101 and 102, was $711,000. Whiting Turner's was approximately $70 million, and Ullman Schulte's was $68 million for combining 101 and 102 together. The discrepancy between the engineer's estimate is nominal. And I think it evidences, in fact, I'm sure it evidences, based upon everything that's been said by DPW and the engineers, it evidences that Whiting Turner understands the bid and has merely swapped or included costs that would be otherwise part of 101, and which Ullman Schulte has essentially said they included additional costs to finance as part of the project, as part of their $643,000 higher price, to include into those advanced pay options under the mobilization. So there's been a lot said, and there's a lot been brought up in the letter that Mr. DeShiel submitted about globally, what is Baltimore City going to do? Does this have an impact on the way we handle our business? And my response to that is, the testimony today has been, this is a non-traditional bid. It's an important bid. It's the third time that the city has put it out to bid, and proportionally, Whiting-Turner's bid numbers have not jumped nearly as much as the engineer's estimate has. The last thing I would point out is, putting aside the question of whether or not Ullman Schulte asked pre-bid questioning, which can happen, it doesn't explain why their mobilization was 5.7 million and the engineer carried an estimate of 10 million. So there's a big disparity there, but the point is, we're focused on a few things, in my opinion. First of all, is the Whiting-Turner bid responsive, and are they a responsible bidder? And the answer to that is yes. They're going to procure payment and performance bonds of $80 million, which means that there is going to be ample security and collateral for the city in the event that there's a problem. They are responsive because not only did they understand what was allowed to be included in mobilization, they specifically did what was directed. Mobilization shall include all of that work. It shall, it's not conditional. As a matter of law, the word shall means you must. And they did do that. And it's going to be verified. It's going to be verified, as Mr. Mullen and Mr. Kadabi pointed out. It will be verified. And then as payments are made to these vendors, there will be proof of payment. There's affidavits of payment that come along with it. There's partial lien releases. All of those things that provide the city the security and the collateral and allows them to obviously move forward at the lowest responsive and responsible price. I see Mr. DeShiel's hand going up. I'd like to ask Mr. Bernard Lahat, who is Whiting-Turner's vice president involved in this project, who should be in attendance, if he would like anything to add, presuming the board is okay with that, of course.
Yeah, well, please let us recognize guests. Just want to make sure that you are complete your testimony at this point.
Yes, I have. There's a lot to be said about it, but what we're talking about succinctly, in my opinion, is, and as has been flushed out in this hearing today, is the comparison of bid items in bid item 101 and 102 as projected by the engineer's estimate, Ullman Schulte and Whiting-Turner, and those are all within $1 million on a $70 million line item. There is no disparity. And half of that, $643,000, represents a savings to the city by doing what the charter would dictate, which is to go forward with Whiting-Turner's lower and responsive bid.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the crux of the matter. That
I understand. I understand. Absolutely.
So close together, but
yes,
the city's forking over $14 million up front as opposed to the course of that time period. The only question I have for you, and I'm not sure if you can answer this or Mr. Lahat can answer or someone else from Whiting-Turner, is when we keep talking about these long lead items, if, I've heard that the installation and the activation of this equipment is not going to take place for several years. I don't know if that to be true. That's just, I guess, what the opposing side has said. And just for my edification and understanding this particular project, if that is the case, what is the lead time of when you actually put the order in to get the equipment fabricated and then you receive the equipment? Are we talking about, 4, 5, 6 months, or are we talking about several years?
So, Mr. Mosby, let me address a couple things in there, or President Mosby, if I can. and then Mr. Lahat can address the timing of it. In terms of the city forking over $14 million, recall, if you will, mobilization gets paid 50% up front, and then it gets paid out over an additional, I believe, 5 months during the progress of the project. And also, please understand that the city, by virtue of selecting this sole source delivery by ABB in particular, and I can give you the specification section. It's 24. I'll get it in a sec, but it is sole source. There was one supplier, and so when we're talking about the city or considering, well, the city is forking over money earlier, I think it needs to be understood that the city has imposed these conditions upon the contractor. The city has said you shall use these people.
No, we realize, Mr. Stevens, in the interest of time, we understand what sole source is. I guess we've talked about lead times for this equipment a lot. So I just want to better understand when we're talking about lead time for this equipment, we put an order in today, we're not getting it for 2 or 3 years from now, or we put an order in today and we're getting it in 5 or 6 or a year from now. Just trying to understand that point that was made inside of DPW's, review of this. So
okay, so I will defer to Mr. Lahat, and I think that certainly the consulting engineer could probably address what their expectation is as well on the delivery and on the cap issue, and then I will stop. This also happened on Guilford Reservoir. Ullman Schulte bid on that a few years ago.
Perfect.
They're aware of that. And so this is not an anomaly. So on that, I will sit down and I will yield to Mr. Lahat if everybody's willing to listen to him.
That's fine. Thank you, Mr. Stevens, for your testimony at this point. The floor is yours, Mr. Lahat, if you are available to speak.
Yes, I am available. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. We cannot see you.
Okay. Sorry about that. My laptop does not have a camera. My apologies. Mr. President, I'd like to address 2 items prior to getting directly to your point regarding the lead time. And Howard touched on it just briefly. Mr. Ullman alluded to the fact that he's never seen this condition before or this kind of mobilization allowed on a project. When in fact on Guilford Reservoir, Alan Myers was the low bidder and awarded that project. And this exact same issue was protested by Ullman Schulte. And the protest was denied and the award was made to Alan Myers. So I'm not sure I understand the comment when he said he's never seen this before. He also implied that a precedent would be set that the city would therefore, from this point forward, never have a cap on mobilization. That completely dismisses the fact that the City of Baltimore, DPW, and Office of Engineering Construction has the latitude on each and every contract to make decisions specific to the unique nature of each of those contracts, when in fact that's what they did at the Guilford Reservoir, and it's what they're doing down at Patapsco. They're acknowledging the uniqueness of these contracts and allowing themselves the ability to create special provisions to the specification, which is exactly what they did. Those special provisions were very clear. At least they were clear to Whiting Turner, and I think they were clear to the other bidders, but I can't speak to that. So now, President Mosby, to your question regarding the lead time on these items, again, these items are custom pieces of equipment, expensive custom pieces of equipment that require a lot of design and a lot of interaction as they're doing the design with the City of Baltimore and their engineers to make sure that it does get fabricated exactly right. The lead time on these items, and this is after you get your submittals approved, get the engineering done, get the submittals in, go the back and forth, well, this needs to be tweaked, that needs to be tweaked, they're perfect, start building it. The lead time after that happens is approximately a year. So if you take, and if we got the submittals in on the very first day of the project, you probably go through 2 or 3 or 4 months worth of submittals, review, meetings with the city's engineers and with the manufacturers to get the engineering exactly right, get the equipment released to get fabricated a year from that point. So you're talking probably a year and a half into the project before that equipment would be made available to be installed on the project. We are currently performing a project right now down at Back River Wastewater Treatment Plant that is a very similar project to this, adding a third feeder to Back River. We set the equipment, this similar type equipment, probably 18 months to 24 months into the project, also a 3-year project. We did not, in fact, set the equipment at the end of the project. There's not enough time if you set the equipment at the end of the project to get it all connected, a lot of interconnection between the various pieces of equipment and the various facilities at each of these plants. Takes a lot of installation time, a lot of coordination time, a lot of ring it out before we flip the switch. Let's make sure it works. So this is not something that these pieces of equipment are not something you buy off the shelf. You don't pull a catalog cut out of a binder and say, here you go, it's the same thing you've done 15 times before. Much effort goes into the unique engineering and the unique coordination with the city and the plant. Before you can even get it made, then it takes time to get it made. And once you put it in, it takes time to connect it and make sure it gets wrung out and made sure that it works properly. So that again, when they flip the switch, Patapsco's still running, not wondering why it's not running. I hope that addresses your questions, and if not, I'll
It does, Mr.
elaborate
Lahat.
more.
It does, Mr. Lahat. Thank you so much for that background. This is what we're going to do. I believe Mr. Ullman has some additional points to address what Mr. Lahat said. I'll go from Mr. Ullman after he addresses those points back to DPW to kind of circle up or nail out any additional concerns, questions, or points that they have to make regarding it, and then the board will proceed. So, Mr. Ullman, if you could address whatever concerns you have as it relates to what Whiting Turner has provided us today.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. First, I'd like to comment that Mr. Lahat's correct that these are long lead items and they take significant amount of time to procure. It's what we do on every job. It's what Whiting Turner did on their job at Back River. And there was no special provision required to pay them up front for this material and equipment. The other thing I'd like to address is Whiting Turner's counsel brought up that we have to pay for this in full. It's $7 million. He's throwing big numbers out. You pay them a small percentage to do the engineering work up front. Very small. I don't know what their commercial terms are with sole sourced ABB, which by the way, is sole sourced on every Baltimore job. And we don't see Baltimore allow this on those projects and those procurements. We deal with it on every job. Our commercial terms with ABB is we pay them 10% up front. So on 7 million, that's 700,000. The difference between our MOB fee and Whiting and Turner's is $14 million. The difference between what the engineer said it would cost if you included the equipment when you took the cap off is $10 million. This bid is materially unbalanced. And if you wait until they get on the job to get the breakdown, the horse is out of the barn. You have an unfair procurement. You've agreed contractually to fork out $19 million in 5 months of the project. And Mr. Comptroller, some quick math on 5% of what $14 million is worth over a 3-year period is almost $2 million. So this is a big smoke and mirror game you're hearing from Whiting Turner and their counsel. In my opinion, let's talk real numbers and let's talk about reality. The plain words in this contract didn't say you could put all this stuff in your billing in advance. If you take the time, and I hope the board members will, it's 1 page. I could put it on the screen, but we've been at this a long time. It talks about being paid for setting trailers and bonds and insurance and all the normal things we have to do to set up a job. And on this project, in our opinion, it's about $5 million. Kiewit had about $4 million. The engineer said 3.2 million. The engineer said add the equipment, they got to 10. Nobody's talking $20 million except Whiting Turner. And I'll make one more point to the city. Besides the cash flow risk, cash flow loss and money, there is a financial risk. A surety. I have filed bond claims of subs that have defaulted. The first thing the surety does is look at how we paid them. And the first defense of a surety is, did you overpay them? Did you pay them in advance? Now, DPW is very intelligent. They got capable people, but that is what you're doing here. And I would also encourage you to check your SRF loan provisions if you're getting SRF loans, because I don't believe SRF would willingly allow you to prepay $19 million or 25% of this contract just to get some equipment ordered. And the fact that we pay, the path that Mr. Lahat described is not shortened one day by when you pay them versus when you pay us. It's not shortened one day. So with that, I'd just like to thank everyone for their time and consideration. Again, I think what's best interest of the city is get the best value, and clearly putting $14 million out is going to cost you, and doing business with Whiting Turner is going to cost you a couple $1 million more in cash flow, not to mention all the financial risk, than doing business with Ullman Schutte. And if it's really your intention to pay for all this up front, let's please rebid this job, put those plain words into the contract, and you will receive the financial benefit of that, at least from our company. Sounds like you already did from Whiting Turner, and you see the difference. It's $600,000. That's what you're getting. You're getting $600,000 to finance $15 million over 3 years. So thank you for your time and consideration. I greatly appreciate it, and we appreciate our relationship with the city.
No, thank you. At this point, we'll turn it back over to DPW. Anything you have to add regarding what Mr. Altman or what Mr. Whiting Turner
Thank you again, President Mosby. I think a lot has been said, really, and the only thing I can say to conclude is to repeat our opinion and assertion that we find the bid to be responsible and responsive, and it's based on our assessment independently through CCJM. It's not materially unbalanced. We do have other projects that are dependent on this particular project being executed. So from our perspective, considering all the controls that are in place, such as retainage, performance bonds, and things of that nature, and also considering the reputation or the expansiveness of Whiting Turner's scope here in the city, we do not feel that they would be disincentivized from performing on this job. So we do ask that the board approve the award to Whiting Turner Contracting Company. Thank you.
It appears that we've had to have this arduous, very long discussion in details. And I guess my engineering brain, not a legal brain, but engineering brain, kind of goes back to the fact that we've decided to go outside the recommendations of the Green Book and provide a very ambiguous kind of instructions associated with potential bidders for this particular bid. And the fact that we say the fact that we describe the items, but don't specifically lay out the specific terms of those items and what we can do in mobilization, I think is kind of literally at the crux of the major concern here. As we see, the bids are within 1%. They are not that material. They're immaterial as it relates to the outcome there. But it appears that, unfortunately, the instructions was so ambiguous that one person would seem to be a little more creative than another person. I am concerned about the way precedent has been kind of set regarding this. As I went over with Mr. Mullen, it appears from my estimation that you could have thrown any equipment inside of mobilization, and as long as you were a penny under the next competitor, you would have been awarded this particular bid. You know, clearly that's not the intention of how this bid was written up, nor is the intention of the way the charter kind of reads associated with lowest bid. But unfortunately, we are here at this particular point. I only have one remaining question from a DPW perspective, and that question is, was the Guilford, as described by Whiting Turner, was the Guilford bid mobilization done the same exact way?
Mr. President, I will have to defer that to the OEC team, Mr. Azam or Mr. Singh.
Morning, board. Yes, we had the sort of a similar situation there. That was of the tanks that were to be built at the Guilford and the mobilization that was required prior to construction. Because of that, we had to open the mobilization. We did not put a cap on that.
So Guilford was done the same way?
Yes, sir.
All right. I think I have enough information at this point. Again, I will go back to the idea that, we just have to do a better job as it relates to if we're going to go away from the Green Book, being direct and a little more detailed. Clearly, I believe it was that ambiguity that created the situation that we have right here. I believe I see a hand from Comptroller Henry.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I still had a question for DPW, possibly more than one, depending on the answer. You've stated very clearly that you don't think that Whiting Turner's bid was unbalanced, and I hear that. I'm going to take that right there at face value. My question is, other than being 0.8% higher, were there any problems or deficiencies in Ullman Schute's bid?
I will defer that to Mr. Patel.
Mr. David, are you on? I understand Mr. Patel is having technical difficulties. He's not able to connect.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
I don't have that analysis in front of me, but my recollection is we did not find any other discrepancies with Holloman's bid.
Okay, well, thank you. The reason I wanted to address that is, aspersions have been made during the course of these proceedings that one firm knows this job better, one firm will do a better job. I'm not interested in questioning the capabilities or the quality of work of either firm. That's where DPW is supposed to be providing us with expert opinions. And so if you guys don't have concerns between them, I'm going to avoid that aspect. But Mr. President, I really do think we need to focus on the question of, if really the decision comes down to low bidder, is the city calculating low bidder correctly? Because if there is an additional cost of money to the city by paying out a substantially larger mobilization fee to one bidder than another, then it seems to me that really should be counted in terms of the cost to the city. And so my primary concern is, I'm not sure we're calculating the low bid correctly in these contracts that have substantial mobilization costs. The second issue I have, and this is more just of a procedural concern that I would want to see DPW address moving forward. Why the decision was made to go from a 5% or a 10% mobilization cap to no cap at all, as opposed to why wasn't Why didn't we put the bid out with a 15% cap? If the issue was concerned that the mobilization fee needed to be higher on this job, was there really an expectation that the fee needed to be 25%? Because if clearly a bidder could respond with a mobilization fee, which frankly was under the original 10% cap, it does sort of call into question whether the city needed to completely reduce the cap entirely in the first place. And I know that that is not necessarily going to be a deciding issue in this particular case, but I would like to hear DPW talk a little bit about their framework going forward based on these conversations.
Thank you, Mr. Comptroller. Again, the reasoning, I think, as you noted, was for removing the cap was to increase competition. Now, that again is not something that we do in every project. It's very seldom that we employ that tactic, if you will. Going forward, I think from a communication perspective, there probably can be and will be improvements in terms of how we lay out the parameters very clearly. The reality is there are other utilities in this industry that in some cases mobilization is not even included in the bid sheet. Mobilization is negotiated after contract is awarded. So there are different ways to approach this, and that is something that we will be looking for best practices for necessary improvements.
Okay, but that being said, Mr. President, I still don't feel like we've addressed the question of when we agree to pay out such a substantial mobilization fee and put that money up front in advance. I don't think we have addressed the fact that there is, as you described, a cost to the city in these times when money is tight, and there are other things for us to be spending that extra $14 million on over the course of the next 3 years. And so I would say right now, I have not been convinced that the Whiting Turner is actually the low bidder from the perspective of what the city is effectively paying for this job.
No, I definitely understand the concern. I'm going to pose this to the board without any objections. I say we defer this item to next week. I think your concerns, Mr. Henry, are valid. I think I hear you, Director Garbach.
I would object to that. I think that the case has been made by the Law Department and Department of Public Works, and I think the board should move forward with this.
With all due respect, Director Garbach, I think the Law Department actually said that they couldn't weigh in at this point on the amount of money associated. They didn't talk about, I guess, to Comptroller Henry's point, if that factors into whether it's a low bid or not. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I thought I heard from the Law Department. I think, Mr. Mayor, your hand is raised.
Yeah, Mr. President, I was just concurring with the DPW director, but if there's going to be a motion to defer, we need to have a vote. I disagree wholeheartedly. I know that we've had a lot of discussion. We know that we are going to have to fix many things with this procurement system, as I stated out at the beginning of the meeting. But for this item in particular, I believe it is time for us to vote on the item as submitted by DPW.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, showing deference to you at this particular time. We will take a vote on the deferral. I believe that there is no requirement that we vote on deferrals. I believe it's kind of almost a courtesy for members of this board if they have additional questions. to kind of defer items. We'll work with your office to try to understand if there is somewhere that, we're not seeing it or the law department is not seeing it, that there is a requirement for us to vote on deferral. My assumption is, Comptroller Henry, your preference would be to defer so you can have additional time to figure out your concerns related to the way the low bid analysis was done. Is that accurate?
Well, I'm not sure that there is, I can tell right now that we did not do a low bid analysis that factored in the cost of the money. I think we should have done that, but clearly we didn't do that. And I've heard, with ample opportunity, nobody from DPW or the law department or anybody else who's on this call has chimed in to say, no, Mr. Comptroller, actually, we did take that into account. And even taking that into account, Whiting Turner is still the low bidder. So I don't think that deferring that by a week is going to change.
Perfect.
Yeah, I don't need to defer it to say that I think we did this wrong.
Okay, Mr. Comptroller, we're an hour and 35 minutes in, so we don't need to belabor that any further. I think that we've provided a lot of opportunity for both parties, all parties involved, to kind of communicate and state their case. At this point, I will take a motion.
Mr. President, I move that the protest be rejected and that the item be awarded to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, Whiting Turner.
Second.
It's been approved in second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
Please have the record reflect that Comptroller Bill Henry, as well as myself, Council President Nick Mosby, are a nay on this item. That's a vote of 3-2. This item is approved, and we will move on to the Health Department agreements.
Thank you, everybody on the board.
No, thank you. The next set of items on the non-routine agenda today can be found on pages 13 through 15, Health Department agreements. Without objections, I would like to consider the 4 agreements on the non-routine agenda as a single item. Without objection, we will proceed and consider these items. Once again, in the interest of transparency, I want to highlight when waivers to our local NBEWE contracting rules are granted to programs that are funded by our federal and state partners, and the city acts as a pass-through entity, it is my understanding again that these are the cases. We have on the call today, Ms. Thompson as well as Chief Miller, just to attest to those things, that these are just pass-throughs. All I need is a yes.
Yes.
Oh, well, thank you. With that, all those in favor of approving the 4 items on the agreement, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
just want to make sure, I know the comptroller noted it earlier, but it's been a minute, that I abstain on items 6 and 7 of these agreements.
Yes, thank you for that.
Thank you.
The next items on the non-routine agenda today can be found on pages 47 through 49. Informal awards, renewals, increases to contracts, and extensions, items 5 and 6. Both items relate to contract number 06000, which is related to the execution of 2021 tax sale. Without objection from the board, I would like to consider these items together. Hearing no objections, we will proceed with these items together. At this time, I would like to recognize Mr. Henry Raymond, Director of Finance, to speak to these items and give us a brief update on where they stand in the upcoming tax sale.
Good morning, President Mosby, Mayor Scott, Controller Henry, honorable members of the board. I'm Henry Raymond, Director of Finance. As it relates to the first item for the advertisement of tax sale, this is a select source arrangement. We selected the Baltimore Sun due to their wider distribution channels for the dissemination of the tax sale information. As it relates to the second item, the vendor real auction, we went through a process of reaching out to the larger municipalities within the state of Maryland and determined that there was only one vendor that could provide an online tax sale auction process for the city of Baltimore for this year. For that reason, we're selecting Real Auction. Presently, tax sale is scheduled for May 17 of this year, and I anticipate that we will recover $14 million to $15 million, and the city desperately needs these resources in order to minimize the projected year-end deficit. And with that, I'll take any questions.
No specific questions for me. I think, Comptroller Henry, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I'm sorry. Did you say that the city would realize you're projecting $14 to $15 million in cash receipts from the tax sale this year, like during the weeks or months immediately following tax sale?
Well, to be clear, May 17 is the tax sale. We will collect that full amount on that particular day. And yes, we're estimating 14 to 15 million of what are presently unpaid liens on properties. And the estimate is based on what was collected from the the July 20 tax sale.
From last year?
From last year.
Okay. Do we have any way to break out from that number the amount collected from tax sale certificates in which properties are actually changing hands versus the amount in which people who have fallen behind on their payment of taxes or water bills or other liens are going to have investors buy the tax sale certificates on their homes and then profit 18% off of having people who already have some type of financial issue have to pay off that certificate immediately for fear of losing their house to somebody who will foreclose. There's no breakout of the percentage of that 14 to 15 million that is legitimate land acquisition and transfer of control versus how much of that is us participating in some private investor profiting off of other people's bad financial situation.
Okay, so let me address it this way. The tax sale process is governed by state law. The mayor has his hand up.
Mr. Director, that's from when you finished.
Hold on, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Recognize
I
you.
just wanted the president to see my hand. It's for when you.
Okay. Yeah, I apologize. Okay, so to address your question, the tax sale process is governed by state law. All lien investors by law are entitled to interest on the investment. The rate is 18% if it's non-owner occupied properties and 10% if it's owner occupied properties.
Okay. But we don't have any way to break out how much of what we collect actually, do we have a way to break out how of the certificates that we sell on, during the tax sale, what percentage are redeemed before they can be foreclosed upon?
Yes, we do have that information. Oh, and let's be clear. The foreclosure process is a completely separate process from tax sale and really has nothing to do with tax sale. The foreclosure process is a completely separate legal process that a lien investor would have to go through. homeowners would have approximately 2 years to redeem the properties before the ability to redeem is closed. But again, foreclosure process is a completely separate legal process from tax sale.
All right, that's all the questions I have, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Comptroller. Mr. Mayor, would you like to add something at this point?
Yeah, no, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Comptroller. I just wanted to again highlight, I know, Mr. President, that you and other members of the council have brought the issue of tax sale, and just know that we have yet, and we're looking at every option that we have to make sure that we understand the predicament that our residents are in because of the pandemic and the fallout, and that we will be making a decision about the tax sale in the coming weeks and working and letting you, the comptroller, and the rest of our elected officials know how we're proceeding.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, you know, as you stated, I did not sign on the letter, but I definitely support my colleagues on the council, overwhelming majority of the council, to either move tax sale like was done in previous administrations, or for us to at least remove homeowners out of the tax sale. Through my work, we understand and know that tax sale is a predatory practice of tax collection in Maryland. I did a lot of work on it when I was in Annapolis. We understand and know that you know, additional interest will be applied, and someone can easily go from owing $1,000 to almost over you know, $2,500 within a year. The tax sale impacts those who are no longer have mortgages. Normally, mortgage companies pay taxes when someone pays off their home. They need to save up and kind of remember to pay them twice a year. We know we're in the midst of a global pandemic when you know, the economy has been hit hard, particularly as it relates to our working class families. The last thing I'll say is we've seen a significant increase of actual homeowners that have been appearing on the tax sale. I think out of 625 homeowners from 2021, 2,564 have been homes that have been owned for over 25 years. So when we talk about generational wealth, when we talk about the racial wealth gap that we have in our city, in our state, in our nation, you know, real estate really sits at the core of that. And that's why, you know, I urge you, Mr. Mayor, to kind of reconsider. I guess we pulled these off the tax sale auction as well as advertisement, the advertisement piece of it, because of that concern. With that, I'm going to ask for a deferral. I would, you know, appreciate if you, Mr. Mayor, would kind of look at this as a very serious issue. I think that once we start to go down the advertising, that puts a tremendous amount of anxiety for folks that are already dealing with a tremendous amount of social and emotional concerns associated with the economic fallout from COVID-19. I'm going to, again, out of deference, but we'll work on trying to understand the rule in which you cited. Out of deference, I'm going to ask the board to defer this item for additional time from the administration to evaluate its stance on delaying the tax sale. Comptroller Henry, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I need a clarification, and I don't know if this would be from the mayor or from the director of finance. Since we're considering both of these items at the same time, the agreement with Real Auction LLC runs from March 1, 2021 through February 28th, 2023. So whether we held the tax sale as currently scheduled, whether we pushed it back some number of months, or whether we skipped it entirely for this year, that would all be within the realm of the agreement that's being considered for Real Auction LLC. But with the advertising in the Sun, if I understand this properly, and this is where I'm looking for some clarification, if we were to hold tax sale on time, we would need to start advertising sometime between March 12th and March 31st of this month. So that doesn't leave a whole lot of time for the mayor and the rest of the administration to make a decision about whether we're going to delay tax sale or not. And so my question is, I mean, I'm fine with deferring this, but if the administration isn't prepared to say right now that they're definitely looking at pushing tax sale back, then I'm not sure that deferring this, I mean, I think deferring this is going to effectively say we are pushing tax sale back, which personally I'm fine with, but I think we should just say that, like, that we're deferring this item because we should be pushing tax sale back. So that was my 2 cents.
Mr. Mayor, anyone from the administration?
Sorry about that, Mr. President. So, Mr. Comptroller, thank you for that. This is again why we are pushing to have this item today. And as I stated previously, I know Director Raymond will go into further detail that we are looking at all of our options, but do believe the best course is to move this item. And I'll turn it over to Director Raymond.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to indicate, as it relates to the time frame, we are on a very short time frame. The advertisement dates essentially are set by state law. We have to begin the advertisement next week, so we're really not in a position to defer.
Yeah, unfortunately, the council has asked the administration to take action for quite some time. I believe it was led by Councilwoman Odette Ramos through resolutions and through other laws over a month in trying to understand where we would be. Again, my concern is if we're going to go down this path and the administration agrees with the council, why put the level of anxiety in our community associated with the homeowners that, with the statistics that I just kind of mentioned? Comptroller Henry.
Having now had this exchange and having a better idea of the timing we're looking at, I would like to ask if you could split these items and we could handle them individually, because I see no problem with passing the contract for real auction, because we're going to need the contract with real auction whether we do this tax sale on time, whether we push it back, or whether we skip it this year altogether. But I agree that we should defer the advertising, because hopefully the administration will decide that we're definitely not moving with tax sale as currently scheduled.
The only thing, Comptroller Henry, is the only time important item is the advertising in the Baltimore Sun. So, we can split it, but I don't know if splitting it helps us get to a resolution today or not.
Oh, I was just from the perspective of we're going to do the auction.
Yeah, I heard your point. I'm just saying that doesn't bias anything today. It's really about the advertising, and if we can defer it or if we're going to decide to defer it. Yes, Mr. Henry, Director.
Yeah, I would just like to add that if there's a deferral or if there is a cancellation of the tax sale, it will ensure that the city has a deficit this year. I implore and recommend to the board that we move forward with the advertisement, move forward with the selection of real auction as the vendor for this year, because this has dire financial consequences for the city.
We just talked about in advance, and I hate to mix items, paying additional mobilization costs up front to one vendor that we didn't have to pay. I realize the perspective that you're coming from, Mr. Raymond, and I truly appreciate it. I think that we must be fiscally responsible and fiscal stewards for our city. Then I think we also can recognize that this is a very unique time. Unfortunately, we have a federal administration that understands the type of pressure that local governments are under. And we look to receive kind of aid that will kind of help the deficits and the issues that you kind of mentioned. I guess when we're talking about the economy and the spillover effect to Baltimoreans, that's where my heart is. That's where my concern is. Again, I'll ask that we defer, again, in deference to the mayor, until we figure out what the rule is. If we want to vote that down, that's fine. And then if we want to vote this out today, that's fine as well. But that would be my recommendation for us, the administration, to seriously look at this. Again, this is not a new item. This is not an item that I'm just bringing up today, but this is an item that we've been talking about for going on 2 months at this point. Is there anything else from any other board members? Hearing none, I'm sorry, Director Garbar.
No, I was going to make a motion to approve both items.
Well, I think I've already made a motion to defer, so I've asked for to defer based off of what the mayor asked us to do. Again, I'm going to show deference to that. I do not think that that's true, but for this particular meeting, we'll do that. I guess there's a motion on the floor to defer.
Nay.
No.
No.
The motion on the floor to defer was defeated. Let the record reflect 1-4. Now, I believe, Mr. Garbar, you have a motion.
Yes, Mr. President, I move approval of items 5 and 6 on pages 47 and 48 as recommended by the Director of Finance.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
Please let the record reflect that there are 3 ayes for Mr. Mayor Scott, Mr. Controller Jim Shea, and Mr. Director Matt Garbark, and there are 2 nays for Mr. Controller Bill Henry and myself, Council President Nick Mosby. Moving on to the next agenda item, I can be found in the non-routine pages 53 through 54. The Department of Transportation task assignment number 8. Here to speak on behalf of DOT is Director Steve Sharkey. Director Sharkey, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Council President, Comptroller, Mayor, and the rest of the members of the Board of Estimates for having us today. This was a non-routine item brought by Comptroller Henry concerning a task order item from WSP, formerly known as Parsons Brinkerhoff. Also, Mr. Samuel Minetti from WSP is here today as well. So they are in the middle of a current tasks. So, well, let me just start back. In terms of engineering contracts, you have a larger long-term engineering contract that goes over a 4 or 5 or plus year period, and you write individual tasks off of that. So as of currently, WSP has not quite met their goals, but they're about halfway through the contract, so have time to meet up with their goals. So right now they're at 15 and 8, whereas the overall goals is 27 and 10. And I'd like Mr. Minetti to jump in here.
Hold on, Mr. Director Sharkey. Please allow this board to call on testimony. At this point, are there any questions or concerns for Director Sharkey as it relates to this item?
Mr. President, I'm happy to wait until after DOT has concluded their aggregate testimony.
Okay. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Comptroller. Mr. Mayor, members of the Board of Estimates, thank you for the time to be here. Yes, in support of what Director Sharkey has said, that is true. The task has been one that we've been performing for a while. We are certainly committed to the goals for MBE and WBE. We have a great track record of achieving and actually exceeding those goals. We have about 1.5 years left on the contract, and we're committed to working with Mr. Sharkey, Director Sharkey, and the department to make sure that further tasks coming through are actually handed to and managed with our MBE partners on the contract. We've done this several instances before and are confident that we will do so again and meet those goals by the term of the contract.
Thank you. Mr. Henry, Comptroller Henry, I believe you have some questions.
Yeah, so this contract was awarded in 2015 with an MBE goal of 27% and a WBE goal of 10%. In subsequent communications with our office, the numbers that are in the agenda were updated. to 18% of attainment for MBE and 12% for WBE. Can one of you speak a little bit about the tasks which were assigned, which resulted in that improved compliance?
Hold on one second. Let me pull it up. So the primary tasks that have MBE and WBE participation included the most recent tasks include the Sharp Leadenhall streetscape design, which was $91,000 total and included $22,000 for MBE and $10,000 for WBE. We have the field compaction testing services, which was $39,000 total, $34,000 MBE, and then on-site engineering support services, which was task number 1, which was $79,000 and 100% MBE. So those are the primary places where the MBE, WBE totals have been provided so far to date.
Okay, and the reason I wanted to check on that is because while the WBE compliance has now exceeded the goal, you're still at only about 2/3 for MBE attainment. And you described this as being halfway through, but I'm looking at it from, if I'm looking at this right, this contract's been in place for going on 6 years. So, and the attainment is still at only 2/3. Is this contract seriously through? Like, does this contract have another 6 years to run?
Well, halfway through in terms of dollars, not necessarily time, but I think there's about 1.5 to 2 years left on the contract.
That's what we understand as well. About 1.5 years.
Okay, and so that's just my concern is
Understood.
that you're a huge percentage of time through, and you're only at 2/3. You're more than 2/3 of the way through in time, and you're only at 2/3 of attainment. What are your projections to make certain that there's going to be such a higher level of participation going forward that it's going to make up this difference?
So historically, there's not been a requirement of the prime engineers for every single task to meet MBE, WBE goals. That has not been historical. It's been, the contract in sum. So of course, for each future contract that has to come before the board, we're going to have a full rundown of each MBE goal, WBE goal with a spreadsheet sent for each task that comes through, and that will be presented to the board.
So, I'm sorry, are you saying that these attainment numbers we're describing are just for the task and not for the contract as a whole?
No, so each individual task, there's multiple tasks. So the numbers we had were for the contract as a whole, but it will have a breakdown of each individual task. Sure.
Okay. Well, so I guess where I'm saying is that if you've spent half the money so far, and you're only at an 18% attainment for an MBE goal of 27%, that means that you're going to need to have well over 27% of the rest of the contract going forward in order to meet the 27% goal for the whole contract. And so what I'm asking now is what is already in the pipeline that you are aware of such that you're projecting that you're going to be spending something in the range of 36% of the future spend of your future dollars are going to have to go towards the MBE goal in order to make this all come out even by the end of the overall contract.
So, I mean, I guess we've kind of had a long-term relationship with most of these firms, and they've always come through for us at the end. We are expecting to probably give more on-call traffic engineering over the next year, but I don't want to name what I'm giving to a particular firm at this time because there's multiple firms that we would choose between for different tasks. So I can't say I am giving this money to WSP now and not to the other particular firms. But we do believe there's going to be sufficient tasks over the next year that MBE participants could jump in on.
Okay, so here's let me ask this question in a slightly different way. Let's say we get to a year and a half from now and the contract is over and you didn't hit 27%. For whatever reasons, things just it didn't come up. What happens then? You know, like what is there a penalty that is placed on a firm at the conclusion of the contract if they didn't hit their MBWB goal? Do we put them on a list saying, you know, where if they bid for future city work, we say, oh, well, you know, the last time you did this, you missed your goal, so we're not going to believe you this time when you say you'll figure out how to do it. I hear what you're saying about how it's going to be made up, but I was wondering, is there any kind of plan that, I mean, I'm not asking even if for whatever reasons of discretion you're concerned about, you know, listing specific firms in public, if, you know, has WFP shared as the prime with DOT, here is the list of subs that we plan to use for work going forward, and we're going to give each one this much of the job. So if you give us this much more work, this is how we're going to spread it around such that we'll hit our MBE, WBE goals. Does that kind of relationship exist between the city and the prime?
We're not, each individual task requires, or each individual task generally lists which MBE subs or WBE subs are listed, but I can't pre-give work. I can't give work ahead of time. So they have.
I guess, Mr. Sharkey, Director Sharkey, what Comptroller is asking is, has the vendor provided you a plan for how they ensure to be able to catch up? You seem pretty confident that they're going to be able to catch up in the year and a half. I think what Comptroller Henry's asking is, where is that confidence coming from? Have they provided how, if they're able to get work, how they're going to be able to correct the disproportionate amount meeting the goal that they weren't able to do with the past performance?
So received a letter from Mr. Minetti, Vice President, stating their intention and goal to meet that goal. Mr. Minetti is here if he wants to speak further to that.
And if I could, just very briefly, I want to be clear. I don't mean this as a direct accusation of anyone in particular to not do it. I'm trying to understand, as the president says, you know, you seem confident that that your vendors work this out by the end. I'm just trying to figure out where does that, you know, why? Like do you, what do they know? Because if you're saying you can't give work ahead of time, how can they tell you when we're approving these contracts in the first place? How are they able to say we're going to hit a goal of 20% and 10% if they don't have some list of subs that they plan to share the work with?
They do have that list. Mr. Minetti?
Sure, I'd be happy to answer that. We do have a list. It's right on the contract, Mr. Comptroller, and I am committing. I mean, we can't assume we are going to receive work or be able to price for tasks from the department, just as the directors indicated. However, our track record of meeting that goal on every contract we've had with the city or the state for that matter, we've always met or exceeded the goal. What I certainly will commit to you, as I did in the letter, that for any tasks we may receive going forward over the next year and a half or so in the contract, we will more than involve. I mean, you did the good quick math of 36%. We will more than involve our partners, our MBE DBE partners, at that level, if not more. In some cases, we've actually just really been the administrative partner with the DBE and allowed them to proceed with the work. So that's probably why the director's indicated that he's got faith in that. Of course, it all depends on the work and how well we price the work for the department as well. We still need to be efficient and effective in that pricing for the department and the city. But we will commit to that, Mr. Comptroller.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you both.
Well, thank you. Are there any additional questions or concerns from the board? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. Unless Comptroller Henry stops me, I believe that was the last item. The Recs and Parks on-call task was moved back to routine at the beginning of the meeting. Hearing no objections, as there is no new business before the board, we will recess until bid opening at 12 noon. The Board of Estimates will reconvene on March 17th, 2021. Thank everyone for tuning in. Baltimore, please continue to stay safe. Use health protocols and continue to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you. Love you, Baltimore.
Happy birthday, Mr. President.
Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. The Board of Estimates is now in session for the receiving and opening of bids. As part of the overall effort to limit transmission of the COVID-19 virus, the Board of Estimates is conducting bid openings virtually. Members of the public can call in to listen to bid openings live by calling 443-984-1696 and entering access code 0842939. Board of Estimates meetings are broadcast live on Charm TV, Channel 25 on Comcast Cable in Baltimore City. Meetings are also streamed on the internet at https://www.charmtvbaltimore.com/live-stream. The Board of Estimates will continue to conduct bid openings virtually while the state of emergency declared by the Mayor of Baltimore and the Governor of Maryland remains in effect. I have the following addendum to note. Bureau of Procurement bid number B50006175, Landscaping and Gardening Services. Please change the bid due date from March 10th, 2021 to March 17th, 2021. Thank you.
I think I have to move that we do that.
I second.
So moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, so now the bids to be received today, March 10th, 2021. Number one, procurement B50006181, Mattel Voice over IP software, maintenance and hardware support. Number two, procurement B50006164, Industrial Cleaning Services, Back River Treatment Plant, Patapsco Treatment Plant, and East Avenue. And number three, procurement B50006158, Group Violence Reduction Strategy, Adult Support and Outreach Provider, which is a price opening. There are not bid bonds for any of these. So send that down. Okay.
You already passed this.
Oh, I already had, okay. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm putting that one down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Number one. The first bid is from Vertical Communications Incorporated in the amount of $435,000.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, wait.
There's,
Huh. Oh, wait, what?
there's two items. One item on
Oh.
page 9 and the other item on B10. Read both of them.
Ah, okay. Well, there's an item 1.
Oh, down here it says total for item 1 plus item 2.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So the total bid from Vertical Communications is $944,600 and no cents. The second bid is from Allen Corporation of America in the amount of $668,647.56.
Mr. Controller, that's 668,647.56. Right?
Mr. Garbark's going to have to tell you because I've already passed my copy down to him.
668,647.56
Okay,
cents.
I got it right. I got lost in the numbers.
The next bid is from Converge One Incorporated for a total amount of $1,071,726.56. 56 cents. Wow. Okay. All right. The next bid is from IPC Technologies Incorporated in a total amount of $177,278.72.
Yes. 100,000?
$177,278.72. And then the final bid under this item is from WWT Incorporated, doing business as VoIP Networks, in the total amount of $990,800.97. Oh, was that the only one?
That's the only one.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, I move that we refer this to the Bureau of Procurement for tabulation and report.
A second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now for the second bid. All right, this bid is from Ace Environmental Holdings LLC. And the total bid price is $4,498,530. second bid is from B&P Environmental 1 for a total bid price of $759,105. Third one is from Modulus LLC for a total bid price of $243,850. And the final one is from Kalyani Environmental Solutions LLC with a total bid price of $151,850. And
So I move that we refer to procurement these for tabulation and report.
I second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Third and final proposal. This is from Youth Advocate Programs Incorporated. And so I should read their total program budget. All right, the total program budget is,
I think they forgot a zero.
I hope they forgot a zero. Let's go with $1,200,000.
Say it again.
$1,200,000. And the second proposal is from SEEDCO, Structured Employment Economic Development Corporation. And their total program budget is $1,088,818.80.
Yes.
So I move that we refer this to procurement for tabulation and report.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. This concludes bid openings for today. The Board of Estimates stands in recess until Wednesday, March 17th at 9 a.m. Thank you very much. Everybody stay safe.
Thank you.